Hey, what's going on everyone? In this review, I'll be looking at a very underrated suit from Char's counterattack, the Refined Gundam Zeta. Okay, I'll be reviewing this master grade kit in 4 categories: the build, the appearance, the articulation, and the gimmicks / transformation, of course. I'll be giving each a score from 1 to 5, so at the end I can tally it all up for an average score. Hopefully I can help you decide if you should pick up this model kit. Alright, now let's jump right into this build. First off, this is another one of those older kits, coming out way back in June of 2001. It came out between the Zeta Gundam 1.0 and the Zeta Plus I reviewed a little while back, so naturally it's kind of a blend between the two. Of course, this isn't a fully transformable suit, so it isn't as complex as the usual Zeta variant. Really, only the legs have any sort of transformable aspect. Speaking of the legs, they're the only section of this build to feature an inner frame. It's not really that complex of an inner frame either, requiring 2 screws to keep them together. The chest and the arms have absolutely zero inner frame, meaning they're more like an old school high grade than any sort of modern master grade. The arms even have that old school seam line running down the front. Still, this is a master grade, so Bandai at least tried to step it up, mainly by providing actual plastic pieces for these vents. Yeah, all the yellow vents are actually plastic inserts, even the thrusters on the back of the skirt and the backpack. Considering the Gundam Alex came out only 2 years before this is a pretty big deal. However, you do need to add all the black paint inside of these vents, since there's no inner frame to poke through. There's also a couple of small squares scattered around the suit which look great with some added black paint. It's nothing too crazy, but enough to keep experienced builders busy. Bandai was also courteous enough to include rubber antenna for the head, which is great, because you just know these things would snap off the second you touch them. That about does it for the build. While it isn't anything special and is overall just dated, I do have to give Bandai some credit for all the yellow inserts for the vents. If it wasn't for these inserts, I could see giving this a score of 3 out of 5. But with them, I'll bump it up to a 3.5 out of 5. I'd say beginners could build this kit pretty early on as long as they really pay attention to the dated instructions. Now let's take a look over his appearance. Right off the bat, the first thing you notice are the colors. This mossy green is just so unique, and it really makes this guy stand out. While it is a little bit more saturated than how it appears in the movie, I really don't mind. If you're going to have a unique base color, you might as well go all the way with it and make it pop. Plus the dark blue, red, and yellow are all spot on. With this being an older kit, the proportions are a little on the fat side, especially if you compare it to the usual Zeta Gundam variant. But when compared to the actual line art, it really isn't that bad. Like the master grade gun cannon, the bulky proportions really make this kit look closer to its anime appearance. I think it's really grown on me over time actually. The panel lines are also pretty anime accurate. There aren't a ton of needless hatches or random lines here. The only ones I found are these ones on the inside of the legs, and really, they don't ruin the look of this kit at all. I will say this kit really benefits from the black paint I added to the vents. I could see the yellow being a little too pronounced without the black to tone it down, so definitely get a black Gundam marker when you pick this kit up. This master grade comes with the usual 2 sets of decals, the first being the standard peel and stick caution signs. You do get a nice Amuro Ray emblem, which is nice, but I would have liked it to be a bit larger, but you know, it's better than nothing. The second is a nice set of dry transfer model and unit numbers. I like that you get so many of them, but unfortunately the bulk of them go to the back weapon system, leaving a pretty slim selection for the actual suit. The appearance of this kit is actually pretty good. Nothing amazing, and I'm sure a 2.0 could do a better job, but nonetheless I really like how close he is to the actual anime. I'll give the appearance a solid 4 out of 5. He definitely stands out next to the other Zeta variants. Okay, now let's knock out this articulation. Starting at the feet, the toes can move down in the usual Zeta Gundam fashion, but you get absolutely nothing upwards. The toes themselves, though, can actually tilt, which is really nice. The ankles are on an angled ball joint, but the leg armor prevents any crazy movement. You do have to be careful about this red section on the back of the leg. It falls off all the time. I'm about at the point of gluing it down. You get a little bit more than a 135-degree bend from the knee, which is about average for its time period. Like most Zeta variants, the legs can move inwards for the transformation, which is pretty cool. The hips are the classic ball joint, so you get pretty solid kicks, but not too much else. I will note the kicks aren't quite as good as the Zeta Plus because there's front skirt armor in the way. Speaking of the front skirts, they have the usual movement. However, the whole front section can pull forward for the transformation. The back skirt is on a polycap, so you do get some movement, but more often than not it just falls off. Because this Zeta variant doesn't have any transformable components in the chest, you'd expect some decent movement, but nope, it's just a ball joint at the waist. You don't get any pop out from the shoulders. Really, it's just spins and lateral movement. For the arm, you get the usual 360-degree spin at the top, and only a little bit more than a 90-degree bend from the elbow. This is pretty bad, even considering its time period. You only get a single set of hands with this kit. Yep, you just get a single set of trigger finger split style hands, and of course, there's no pegs. The head is on a single ball joint, however because of the size of the head and neck section, you really don't get much movement. Lastly, there are these little pop-out fins on the backpack. They seem kinda pointless to me. I mean, like, what are they supposed to do? They're just kinda out here. Anyways, that's really about it for the articulation. It's all the usual joints and nothing more. Despite this, none of these joints really have that great movement. Aside from the knee, this articulation is about on par with the Master Grade gun cannon, which is pretty crazy considering the gun cannon is so much fatter than this kit. I have no choice but to knock this score down to a 2.5 out of 5. He can stand straight up and you might get 2, maybe 3 poses if you work at it. Finally, let's take a look at these gimmicks. First up is the usual beam rifle. It's honestly pretty boring, just 2 large pieces snapped together. Because the handle is so small though, he can actually hold it pretty well. Its main issue is how the wrist is bent. It kinda prevents this kit from holding the gun straight out. Next we have the token beam sabers. I really like the design of these sabers and the yellow blade is just so cool. You can hold the sabers pretty well too because they're so small. You get a dedicated set of closed beam sabers as well for storing in the backpack. Speaking of storing in the backpack, when you open this hatch, the beam sabers actually pop up. It's such a cool little touch. Lastly, you get this curved shield. It's not really the most innovative design, but it can look pretty cool if you decal it up. Like most suits from Char's counterattack, it pops into the back of the arm. So unless you have this arm at a really weird angle, it'll probably be facing backwards most of the time. The only real gimmick found in the actual suit are these pop-out grenade launchers. They're found in the side skirt and the forearms. Unfortunately, the forearm grenades require painting, so I doubt you'll get much use out of them. And that's really it for the weapons. There's no extra guns or anything. All that plastic is saved for the back weapon system. The BWS looks great. Like the suit itself, all the colors are actual molded pieces, even this green trim on the wings, which is usually just a sticker. It also has some pretty solid panel lines that really spice up the design without being too overbearing. The only real issue I have with it is the lack of a locking mechanism for these flaps on the bottom. They just fall down whenever you pick it up. It does come with a nice stand to set it on though. It's really simple, only 2 pieces laid over top of each other, but it's nice nonetheless, especially because you don't get any landing gear. Okay, now let's combine this back weapon system and the actual suit for the transformation. Honestly, this transformation isn't that great. It looks fine, but the limbs are really tight and the instructions really aren't that clear. It also requires these 2 extra connecting pieces to attach the shield to the chest, which this is a master grade, so there really shouldn't be any parts you need to transform this thing. But anyway, speaking of the shield, because of how poorly it connects to the legs, it will disconnect and swing down all the time. It's really annoying. You can lay this kit on the dedicated stand, but it'll fall over if you so much as look at it weird since there's no connecting piece to keep it up. Honestly, even though the transformation is technically simpler than the usual Wave Rider, I think I'd rather have the Wave Rider. They tend to be sturdier, and they come with the landing gear so you don't have to deal with the stand. On a side note, if you like applying decals to the shoulders, you may want to hold off on this transformation altogether, since it can cause the shoulder decals to scratch off. And that's it for the gimmicks. The gun and beam sabers are about standard. The appearance of the BWS bumps the score up a little bit, but the lackluster transformation really prevents it from receiving that high of a score. I'll give the gimmicks a just above average score of 3.5 out of 5. While the suit and BWS look pretty good on their own, once you combine them, all the flaws start to come out. Okay, now let's wrap this up for an average score. The build was a 3.5 out of 5. It's pretty dated, but I have to give Bandai some credit for including all those yellow vent inserts. The appearance was a 4 out of 5. Unlike most Zeta variants, this kit actually looks good on the bulkier side. The articulation was a 2.5 out of 5. When I'm comparing the articulation to the gun cannon, you definitely know there are going to be issues. And finally, the gimmicks received a 3.5 out of 5. While the BWS looks fine on its own, the transformation is pretty poor. Tallying all that up, dividing, and of course rounding, this kit receives a 3.4 out of 5, but more accurately, it receives a 67.5%. This kit is pretty similar to the Zeta Plus I reviewed a little while back, which makes sense considering they're both Zeta variants released around the same time period. However, this kit just feels so much more old school. from the borderline non-existent inner frame, to the lackluster articulation, to the flawed transformation. It's just all around the worst kind of dated. If you're into Zeta kits, I'd definitely go with the Zeta Plus first. However, if you're just into Char's counterattack, and you just wanted to stand next to your Sazabi and look good, then you won't be too disappointed. Alright, feel free to leave any questions you have about this kit in the comments, and I'm more than happy to get back to you. You can also recommend more kits for me to review, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.